Her father was dead before the sun had fully risen, and by noon, she was no longer a daughter but a burden. The halls of Ashbourne felt colder that day, not with grief, but with calculation. Servants whispered like wind through broken glass, their eyes darting from the black ribbons on their sleeves to the pale figure standing alone by the staircase. Lady Clara Whitmore did not cry, she had wept the night before, silently, as her father's hand slackened in hers. Now her stepmother's voice, smooth as polished silver, sliced through the silence. "Clara," Lady Margaret said, her tone soaked in false pity. "You must understand, these are difficult times. The estate can no longer support idle sentiment. Your father's will, regrettably, leaves no provision for you." The words landed like stones. Clara's breath caught, her fingers trembling around the hem of her morning gown. "No provision," she repeated, voice barely more than a whisper. "I am his blood." Lady Margaret's eyes glittered. "You are his inconvenience. And I will not have my husband's name dragged through ruin for the sake of your misplaced pride." There was no shouting, no drama, just the soft, deliberate cruelty of a woman who enjoyed precision. A footman entered, holding a small trunk. Inside were a few dresses, a prayer book, and her mother's locket, the only relic of a gentler past. Clara stared at it all as though it belonged to someone else. When she stepped outside, the spring air struck her like a slap. The great doors of Ashbourne closed behind her with a hollow finality, the sound echoing over the gravel drive. For a moment she stood still, her black veil fluttering in the breeze, and the enormity of her solitude pressed upon her chest until she could scarcely breathe. Her carriage, no, Lady Margaret's carriage, was nowhere to be offered. Clara walked through fields that still smelled faintly of morning rain, her slippers sinking into the damp earth. She walked past the hedgerows where she had once gathered wildflowers with her father, past the chapel where he had knelt beside her as a child. Each step stripped away a layer of her old life, until there was nothing left but exhaustion and disbelief. She reached the river by mid-afternoon. The River Derwent, broad, steady, and indifferent, flowed through Derbyshire like a vein of moving glass. Its sound was the only thing alive in the stillness. Clara sank to her knees on the bank, her reflection trembling upon the water. "Forgive me, father," she murmured. "I tried to be what you wished me to be." The words dissolved into sobs she had not meant to release. All at once, the poise and restraint drilled into her from girlhood shattered. She pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking, the soft fabric of her gown darkening where it met the mud. Behind her, unseen, a horse approached. Its hooves slowed, then stopped. Alexander Cavendish, Duke of Wexford, had not intended to travel through the valley that day. His return from London had been delayed by politics, petitions, and the dull roar of men who loved their own voices. He had sought solitude, a ride through the countryside to clear his thoughts. Yet as he drew near the bend of the river, he saw her, a woman alone, half collapsed upon the bank, her grief so raw it made the landscape seem suddenly human. He dismounted quietly, uncertain why his chest tightened. She did not hear him approach. "Madam," he said softly. Clara startled, turning sharply, her eyes wide and tear-streaked. The sight of his fine coat, his black horse, and the subtle crest on his gloves told her instantly who he was, or at least, what he must be. A man of rank. A man untouched by ruin. "Forgive me," she stammered, standing too quickly. "I did not mean to trespass. I will go." "You are on no man's trespass," he said, his voice calm, low. "You are, in fact, dangerously near to fainting." She hesitated, pride warring with weakness. "Please, my lord," she said, her words trembling but dignified. "Do not pity me." He studied her, the smudges of earth on her gown, the pale defiance in her eyes. "I would not insult you with pity," he replied. "But I will not leave you here, either." The gentleness in his tone undid her more than cruelty ever could. Something in it, an earnestness foreign to her world, made her throat ache. "I have nowhere to go," she confessed, almost involuntarily. "Then, for now," he said, removing his gloves, "you may stand here, by the river, until you remember who you are." She blinked at him. "Who I am?" "A lady who does not bow to misfortune," he said, offering his handkerchief. "I have seen many men brought low by lesser grief, yet you remain upright. That is not nothing." Clara looked at the embroidered monogram, AC, and hesitated. Then, slowly, she took it. The fabric was warm from his hand. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the murmur of the river, and somewhere in the distance, church bells tolled the late hour. "May I ask your name?" he said at last. "Clara Whitmore." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "The Earl's daughter." Her chin lifted. "The disinherited one." He inclined his head. "Then the Earl was a fool for trusting his affairs to others. I knew him, slightly, an honorable man." Her lips trembled. "Honor cannot defend the dead." "No," he said quietly. but it may yet protect the living. The simplicity of his answer stunned her. It was not grand, not gallant, simply true. She turned away, unable to meet his gaze, for fear that he might see the desperate gratitude she refused to feel. "Where are you staying tonight, Lady Clara?" "Nowhere," she admitted, voice breaking. "I had thought to walk until I thought of something." He looked toward the distant hills, his decision forming before reason could argue. "My estate lies 3 miles east, across those woods. You will find shelter there, only until proper arrangements can be made." "I cannot," she whispered. "If I am seen under your roof—" "Then let them speak," he interrupted, with sudden force. "Society will tire of its own scandal long before I tire of my conscience." She turned back to him, startled. For the first time, she saw not the Duke, but the man, his eyes shadowed with a loneliness that mirrored her own. "I cannot repay you," she said faintly. "I have not asked you to." The silence that followed was neither comfortable nor awkward, it was suspended, as if the air itself had paused to listen. Then, as though summoned by fate, a single drop of rain fell between them. He extended his arm. "Come. The road is long, and the storm will not wait for indecision." Clara hesitated only a moment before taking it. His gloved hand closed gently around hers, steady and unyielding. Together, they turned from the river, their footsteps mingling with the first patter of rain. As they disappeared into the mist, the water's surface rippled where she had knelt, a brief tremor, as if the river itself had sighed in witness. Behind them, the estate of Ashbourne stood silent against the grey horizon, its windows gleaming like unblinking eyes. Within those walls, Lady Margaret watched the rain fall and murmured to herself, "Let her go. The world will devour her soon enough." But the world, that day, had other intentions. Scandal arrived before morning tea. The first whisper slithered through the servants' wing of Wexford Manor before sunrise, travelled along corridors with the speed of a confession, and by breakfast, had reached the marble dining hall where the Duke of Wexford sat in his usual silence. The Duke had brought home a woman, alone, unchaperoned. Alexander Cavendish felt the weight of the rumor before anyone dared to voice it. He was accustomed to scrutiny, the son of a line too dignified for spontaneity. He had learned early that the English peerage observed sin not to condemn it, but to savor it. Yet, this, Clara Whitmore, the disinherited daughter of an earl, sleeping under his roof, was not a sin of pleasure but of mercy. And mercy, he found, was a crime of its own in polite society. Clara had awoken to a silence she did not trust. The previous night, she had accepted a stranger's kindness because there had been no other choice. Now, as she stood in a borrowed gown by the window of the guest chamber, she felt its weight pressing upon her conscience. The manor was magnificent, columns, frescoes, all the cold beauty of inherited wealth, and yet every inch of it whispered, "You do not belong." Lady Amelia Cavendish, the Duke's younger sister, was the first to enter her room that morning. Graceful, composed, and curious in the way of women who had never been denied comfort, she regarded Clara with a mixture of sympathy and intrigue. "So it is true," Amelia said softly. "You were turned out of Ashbourne." Clara nodded, too weary for pride. The Countess decided grief was not a suitable tenant. Something flickered in Amelia's expression, admiration, perhaps. "My brother seldom involves himself in anyone's misfortunes. You must have made quite the impression." Clara flinched. "I fear I have only made him vulnerable to scandal." "Scandal," Amelia murmured, approaching the window, "is the price of compassion in our world. Fortunately, my brother pays his debts without complaint." But the murmurs were not so easily dismissed. By afternoon, word had reached the neighboring estates, carried by servants who thrived on intrigue. Invitations to Wexford's upcoming spring ball were rescinded by cautious hostesses. Even the vicar's wife sent polite inquiries laced with moral venom. Alexander read the letters in his study, each one a neat condemnation wrapped in courtesy. He tore the last unopened envelope and said aloud, though no one was there to hear it, "Let them choke on their own virtue." When he met Clara in the corridor that evening, her eyes met his with wary gratitude. "I have caused you trouble," she said. He studied her composure, the quiet intelligence in her gaze that seemed to weigh every word before releasing it. "You have caused me reflection," he replied. "A far rarer disturbance." That night, the Duke's sister insisted Clara join them for supper. It was an attempt to restore propriety, or at least the appearance of it. The long dining table glowed under candlelight, the polished silver reflecting Clara's uncertainty back at her. Alexander sat at the head, his posture immaculate, his expression unreadable. Halfway through the meal, Amelia turned to her brother. "You will attend the ball in Bath next month, will you not?" "I have no interest in Bath," he said. "You have every reason to go," she pressed. "Society waits to see if you intend to make an announcement." Her glance flicked toward Clara, subtle yet unmistakable. The Duke's knife paused mid-cut. If society requires an announcement, it shall have one when I deem it worthy. The air thickened. Clara set down her glass, her cheeks pale. My lord, she said quietly, I will not be the cause of your defiance. I will leave tomorrow. Alexander's eyes met hers. And where will you go, Lady Clara? She hesitated. Anywhere that will not ruin you. His voice softened, dangerously so. The only thing that ruins a man is cowardice. You have given me no cause for shame. The rest of the meal passed in silence, but the tension between them hummed like a current beneath calm water. Later, unable to sleep, Clara wandered into the portrait gallery. The walls were lined with generations of Cavendishes, stern men, delicate women, all gazing down with judgmental serenity. She stopped before one painting, a woman in a crimson gown, eyes bright with melancholy. My mother, said a voice behind her. She turned. Alexander stood in the doorway, unbuttoned waistcoat, candle in hand. She was not born noble, he continued. My father married her for love, against counsel. He was mocked for it until the day he died. Clara looked back at the portrait. Did she regret it? She said regret is for those who believe they could have chosen differently. The candlelight cast his face in soft shadow. She saw, not the aloof Duke of Rumor, but a man who had inherited more solitude than privilege. I should not have come here, she whispered. And yet, he said, stepping closer, I find I cannot imagine this house without you. She turned away, heart pounding. You must not say such things. I must, he said simply. It is the only honesty left to me. Her breath caught. The words hung between them, impossible, dangerous, true. But before she could speak, a sound broke the moment, the faint rustle of skirts, the echo of retreating footsteps. Lady Amelia had been standing at the corridor's end. She vanished before either could call her name. The next morning, the house was no longer quiet. A carriage arrived from London, bearing a letter sealed with the Cavendish crest. Alexander read it in silence, jaw tightening. Clara, watching from the threshold, saw his expression darken. It is my aunt, he said finally. She demands I dismiss you immediately. She claims you are unfit to reside here unwed. Clara stepped back. Then I must go. Today. He looked up, voice low. Do you truly believe I would surrender you to their cruelty? You cannot fight them all, she said. A duke may defy rumor, but not the crown's attention. He moved toward her, slow, deliberate. Clara, I have stood before Parliament, the king himself, and felt less conviction than I do now. Her eyes filled with helpless fury. You speak of conviction while I am branded your folly. What do you expect me to do, hide while your name burns? He stopped just before her, his voice barely a breath. I expect you to trust me. She wanted to, oh, how she wanted to, but trust was a luxury she could not afford. Then tell me, my lord, she said, trembling, when they force you to choose between your honor and me, which will you protect? His silence was answer enough. Clara turned from him, the hem of her gown whispering against the marble floor. Outside, rain began to fall again, the same rain that had first brought them together. By nightfall, she was gone. But when dawn broke, a sealed letter lay upon her empty bed, pressed into the pillow as if left in prayer. Its wax bore the Cavendish crest, and beneath it, in the Duke's hand, only 6 words. If you go, my heart goes with you. He found her where it had all begun. The river Derwent ran swollen with rain, its current restless and silver under a bruised sky. Alexander Cavendish rode hard across the soaked fields, his coat plastered to his shoulders, his face drawn with a desperation he could no longer disguise. 3 days had passed since Clara Whitmore's disappearance from Wexford Manor, 3 days in which the world had reminded him of its smallness, every whisper, every letter, every look declaring the same thing. The Duke had lost his senses for a ruined woman. He had not cared. But he had feared that she might vanish beyond his reach, swallowed by a world that had already taken everything from her once. Now, dismounting by the river's edge, he saw her. Standing beneath the bent bough of a willow, her cloak drenched, her face pale with exhaustion, yet more composed than he remembered. She turned at the sound of his boots on the sodden ground. My lord, she said softly. You should not have come. I had no choice, he answered, breath misting in the cold air. You left without word, without farewell. You left me to silence. Clara's expression did not waver. Silence is safer. You cannot be condemned for what you cannot defend. I would defend you against the entire kingdom, he said, his voice rising, not in anger, but anguish. Do you think I have endured this storm of scandal only to let you vanish into it? She drew her cloak tighter. You mistake your pride for devotion. You think your defiance noble, but it will destroy you. I will not be the blade that cuts your name from history. He took a step closer, the river roaring behind him. History remembers titles, Clara. I would rather be forgotten than loveless. The words struck her with terrible clarity. For a heartbeat, the mask of composure cracked, revealing the tremor beneath. "You do not know what you ask," she whispered. "You speak of love as though it were salvation. It is not. It is ruin, mine, if not yours." Alexander's hands clenched at his sides. "Then let it ruin us both." The air between them trembled, charged with all that had gone unsaid. Clara turned away, staring at the churning water. "When I was a child," she said quietly, "I believed the river could carry grief away. I would stand here after my mother died, imagining my sorrow floating downstream to some kinder shore. I was foolish to think pain can be washed clean." He moved closer still, his voice low. "And yet you came back here." "Because I am still that foolish child," she said, her eyes glistening. "Because I needed to see the place where my life began again, and where it should end." He caught her hand, sudden and firm. "Do not say such things." "Why not? What life waits for me, Alexander? The world has no mercy for women without dowries or names. I am spoken of as a scandal, a stain on your honor. Every kindness from you only deepens my disgrace." He pulled her toward him, their faces inches apart. "Then let the world choke on its judgment. You think I act from pity? You think I cannot tell the difference between mercy and love?" She met his gaze, searching, trembling. "Then tell me, my lord, what is love to a man who has never been denied anything?" He inhaled sharply, the question cutting deep. "It is this," he said. "It is you. It is the unbearable knowledge that I could lose you again and be condemned to live, still breathing, when my heart no longer does." Her breath faltered. "Do not speak poetry to a dying dream." "I speak truth," he said. "You are not my charity, Clara, you are my choice." The rain intensified, a steady rhythm against the river's surface. Her tears mingled with it, indistinguishable from the storm. "I cannot belong to you," she said at last. "I cannot bear to be the reason your family disowns you." "I no longer seek their approval," he replied, his voice steady now, dangerous in its calm. "I have already written to the crown. Your father's title will be restored. His debts repaid. You will have what was stolen from you." She stared at him in disbelief. "You went to the king?" "I went to truth," he said. "And if truth requires crowns and signatures to speak, so be it. I would buy your dignity with every ounce of mine." For the first time since her exile, Clara's composure broke completely. She covered her face with trembling hands, a sound between laughter and sob escaping her lips. "You are a fool," she said through tears. "A reckless, impossible man." He smiled faintly. "Then let me be a fool beside you." She lowered her hand slowly, and in her eyes he saw the war between love and fear, the fragile, trembling moment before surrender. "If I say yes," she whispered, "you will be ruined." "If you say yes," he said, stepping closer until the rain blurred their outlines into one, "I will be saved." The river surged against the banks, the wind howling through the trees. He reached for her, and this time, she did not pull away. Their foreheads touched, nothing more, but it was enough to quiet the storm within them. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to that single, fragile connection, two souls defying an empire's scorn. Then, distantly, the clatter of hooves. Voices. The world returning. Clara stepped back, her eyes wide. "They've come for you," she said. "For us," he corrected. From the ridge above, two riders appeared, messengers in the Cavendish livery, their coats dark with rain. One dismounted, shouting over the wind. "Your Grace! The king's reply has arrived." Alexander froze. "So soon?" The messenger handed him a soaked envelope, the royal seal glinting faintly in the dim light. Clara's pulse quickened as he broke it open, scanning the contents in silence. His expression changed, something between shock and wonder. "What is it?" she asked, breathless. He looked up at her, rain dripping from his hair, his eyes alight with something she had never seen before. "It is done," he said. "Your father's estate, your name, it is all restored." Clara swayed, dizzy with disbelief. "But how?" "The king remembered my service in Parliament," he said quietly. "He granted it as a favor. You are no longer a fallen lady, Clara. You are the rightful daughter of Ashbourne." She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears mingling with the rain. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of shame lift from her chest. "And what of you?" she asked softly. "What price did you pay for such a gift?" He smiled, though his eyes darkened. "My title remains, but my alliances do not. The Duchess of Norwood has already begun her campaign against me. I expect to be quite unpopular by next season." Clara laughed through her tears, the sound fragile but real. "Then we are both outcasts now." He reached for her hand. "Then let us be outcasts together." For a moment, the world stilled. The river quieted, the wind softened, and in that fragile peace, the future seemed almost possible. But as their hands met, the messenger spoke again, hesitant, uncertain. "Your Grace, there is more. The letter bears a second seal. It was addressed to you alone, from Lady Margaret Whitmore. Clara's breath caught, the color draining from her face. Alexander turned the second envelope over, its wax marked not with the royal crest, but with the serpent emblem of Ashbourne. He met Clara's gaze, the storm reflected in both their eyes. Then the past, he said quietly, breaking the seal, has not finished with us after all.